May natatakog na ng city dia sige nagbubully mga
Hello, everybody. Just want to do some technical check. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, crystal clear.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello, Tammy. Tammy.
Hi, how are you?
How should I pronounce your name?
Tammy Jonas.
Tammy Jonas. Okay. Nice. Great.
Great.
Okay, my name.
You dropped out for a moment. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So sorry. Yeah, my name is Shakirin. I'm the
Shakirin.
moderator. Yeah, I'm the moderator for today.
Great to
nice.
meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you too. So we just wait for another 10 minutes, I think, perhaps. Just waiting for people to come in to join us. Yeah.
Now I have a short presentation, some slides.
Do you want to test?
Maybe I should just.
Hi, welcome. Tammy Jonas, I'm Melissa. And also,
Hi,
yeah, okay. And also, welcome Dr. Muhammad Shakirin for the moderator for today. So, Tammy, how should I address you, Tammy or Jonas?
Just Tammy. Yep.
Okay, Tammy. All right. So, are you going to control your slide, or you want me to control for you?
Yes, I think it's probably easier if you do. What if I put the Dropbox link in the chat? Will you be able to open it then, do you think?
Okay. Or can you email to me?
It might be.
Okay. Here.
See if that doesn't work, then I'll email it.
Okay.
It's easier, I think, because then I have some other words that I'd like to have on my screen so I can see them. And if I share my screen, it doesn't work.
All right. So I will control the slide for you. So you will just say next. So I will.
Yeah, I'll just say next slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we will start at 3 to allow us to come in.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Hi, Tammy.
Annie, are you there? Where are you? Hello. It's good to see you. You're on mute.
I just missed a lot of your talk the other day. This was with Peter Rosset.
It was so good. Did
Yeah,
you saw we've done the recording, yeah?
Yes. But I need the link later. Later just send. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll hang on. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
It was great. I mean, he's so wonderful. You've just been there.
So how was it? Can you see the slide?
It's sort of, yeah, you see it.
Hi, Dr. Shakirin. Thank you for
Hi.
joining us and doing this with Srimas. Yay.
Definitely.
Good to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Tammy is a very busy woman, so and we
I
are so
bet.
happy that she can spend her time with us as well.
Yeah, I sent you a photo before. I was just in the burning room butchering today.
Yeah.
And then yes.
It's
Anyway.
a meat smith, a woman with many skills.
I do a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And how have you been, Annie?
Again?
How have you been? Are you well?
I'm well. I'm good. Just staying at home here in not going anywhere.
Yeah, like all of us.
Yeah. So I think it's so surprising how much you can do actually, and learning how to multitask at home. This is new thing that I gained during this COVID pandemic. So
Yeah.
Yep.
It's maybe a little too much sometimes, I think. We were talking about it yesterday that because we can't go to all of the meetings in Rome or KL, normally when we would go to those meetings, we would leave the work at home. But now we do all the work at home and then we log in for the meetings at night and then we get up in the morning and do all the work at home. And it's like,
it's true. It's really
a lot.
Overwhelming. It can be.
It is. And it seems to be making the UN spaces even worse. Like really, I feel like they're taking advantage of the virtual modalities to just be worse and worse about civil society engagement.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that they are doing quietly yeah, behind, behind the scene, and it's slowly taking over all this platform. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It is sad, even the term agroecology, food sovereignty. This is all being taken and put into their context. So this is
Yeah.
sad to see how it is that way. So campus is also closed, Dr. Shakirin.
Yep,
Yeah.
everything closed. I don't know what happened in the campus now. Just pray anything. Just pray everything is okay.
Yeah.
Are you back in lockdown up there?
Yeah,
Yes.
we are
They're
kind of
still
like
under lockdown mode.
These may just be little things, but it's the little things that could make
infinity. It's like
And cases are getting
worse and
going
worse.
up. Yeah. So
Yeah,
Oh, it's getting worse for you again?
yeah.
yeah.
I'm not sure why. Is it because we are so efficient in screening now that we can detect everything, and we can cover so many bases.
I'm having trouble hearing because somebody's sound is on.
security in mind at the same time.
Okay. So let's see. Mic is on. My mic is on.
Yeah, that's better. Oh, no.
I think the admin can. Yeah.
Yeah, admin can host. Who is hosting? Can make me co-host also, please.
Doktor, saya ada buat doktor juga sekejap saya buat doktor sebagai co-host.
And then nanti you tengoklah siapa yang macam mikrofon active, tapi dia tu kita mute kan ya.
Okay.
Just in case internet not stable for here, so we just cover. So we can never know how internet is.
Everywhere in the world, it seems. It's the
Yeah. And yet we are depending so much on this now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cost is actually not cheap. So
No.
yeah. What time is it for you now, Tammy?
It's just 5 o'clock.
Okay.
It actually, yeah, it turned out I have a very busy life, as you know, but this turned out to be quite a good day because we finished our butchery a bit early, and I have the first weekend of no that I've had in a really long time, so it's a perfect night for me.
Yeah.
And we leave for our big trip. We're doing a home, well, if the borders are open, we should be driving all the way to far north Queensland, leaving in 1 week's time and teaching agroecology workshops all the way up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just hope they keep the borders open.
Hopefully, yeah. Because for us, nothing moves on the ground at the moment. So
yeah, it's been very little here, but I'm not going to any cities. It's only in the regional areas, and we've had no cases in the regions in like a year.
Okay.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. I think it's 3 o'clock already. So shall we start or?
Yeah, we can start. I think, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, shall we start? Tammy, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good afternoon and good morning or good evening to everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. Okay. Thank you for joining us for today's international webinar on agroecology and community. Title for this webinar will be agroecology, a life in common with nature. Okay, so my name is Muhammad Shakirin Mispan, so the moderator for today's webinar. Okay, before we start our webinar, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. Okay, today's webinar is also going live on YouTube and also Facebook, and you can watch our live streaming on our official Facebook, our official Srimas Facebook and YouTube channel. For those who can't join our Zoom session right now, feel free to check out our Facebook and YouTube. So we also invite your comments and questions. So please look at the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of any questions for the speaker at any point, just type your question in there in the chat box, and I will hold it. I will try to note it down, and we hold it until the Q&A session after the talk. Put your mic during this webinar session. Okay, before I pass the session to our speaker, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker today is Tammy Jonas. She is an agroecologist in principle and in practice. Farming heritage breed large black pigs, cattle, and garlic with her husband Stuart, and the unceded lands of the Jaja Wurrung people in the Central Highlands of Victoria. She is president of the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, AFSA, co-editor and co-author of Farming Democracy, Radically Transforming the Food System from the Ground Up, and undertaking a PhD at the University of Western Australia on the role of farmers with rare and heritage breed livestock in an agroecological transition and decolonization of agriculture in Australia. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hand the floor or the screen over to Tammy. Tammy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Shakir, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to bringing us all together to share our struggles and to be active in our optimism together. I'm joining you from the lands of the Jaja Wurrung people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and acknowledge that their land was never ceded. Next slide, please. On our farm, I'd like to first introduce myself as a farmer before I talk about agroecology as a science, a set of practices, and a social movement. So here on our farm on Jaja Wurrung country in the Central Highlands of Victoria, which is in the southeast of Australia, we raise heritage breed large black pigs and speckle-lined cattle on pasture. We transform the carcasses into a range of fresh cuts, small goods, and charcuterie in our on-farm butcher shop. Bones that remain after we have processed them into broth for soups. Is that better? I was muted. Pyrolized into bone char using the retort that you see in the bottom right of that photo. That's then activated in barrels of microbially rich biofertilizer and used to grow our small commercial crop of garlic, which you see in the middle bottom photo there. And we're a community supported agriculture farm, or CSA. So nearly all of our meat goes to 80 households who are members of the farm. They commit to a minimum of 1 year in our solidarity economy and share the risks as well as the very delicious rewards of our farm. And we describe our farm as paddock to paddock, where nutrients are fully recycled on farm and inputs are minimal and from sustainable sources. Like millions of other smallholders around the world, we're maintaining biodiversity at the genetic, species, and ecosystem levels. Living a life made in common with nature, we conserve and sustainably use the biodiversity in our care. And as non-Indigenous Australians, we share the benefits of our use with the First Nations peoples by paying 1% of our income to a local Indigenous organization. Next slide, please. It's timely in the period of COVID to remind ourselves of the risks of loss of biodiversity in agriculture caused by industrial agriculture. The production of a constantly narrowing range of species and breeds of animals and plants is leading to greater risks in the food system. In the case of the rise of zoonoses like coronavirus, one of the most significant risks is from intensive livestock production and the expansion of industrial agriculture into remote areas of forest, giving rare pathogens new opportunities to access vulnerable hosts, giving rise to new and more virulent strains of influenza and coronaviruses such as COVID-19. I'm going to take you through what I understand as the history and contemporary state of the rise of alternative agricultures that have arisen as a response to the problems that are caused by industrial agriculture. And then I'll look specifically at regenerative agriculture and agroecology. And I'll finish with some views on why agroecology offers the transformation our food and agriculture systems need. I aim to build our collective knowledge, wisdom, and solidarity as we work to radically transform the food system from the ground up. Next slide, please. Farmers and researchers have been practicing and writing about the need to move away from chemical agriculture for nearly 2 centuries, all the way back to somebody called George Perkins Marsh, who warned in 1864 in a book called Man and Nature that we were heading down a path of destruction. And that book is credited with launching the modern conservation movement. Later, the agronomist Sir Albert Howard went to India in the first decade of the 20th century to teach the locals how to modernize their agricultural systems, only to be transformed himself into an advocate of organic agriculture by what he learned there. Along with Rudolf Steiner, J.I. Rodell, and Lady Eve Balfour, Howard is considered one of the founders of the organic movement in the global north. All promoted the use of composts instead of chemical fertilizer, and they focused on the critical role of humus and mycorrhizal fungi in healthy agroecosystems. We're in need of a historical corrective here that's as much about today as yesterday. The influence of Indian peasants on the rise of organics in the north is rarely acknowledged. The Green Revolution in India all but decimated small-scale farmers' traditional sustainable practices, though the recent farmer protests certainly demonstrate the collective will there to reclaim the right to life and livelihood. And while the organics movement has clearly had a net ecological benefit due to reduced use of agricultural and veterinary chemicals, amongst other more sustainable land management practices, what started as a movement has become an industry in its own right. Industrial organics are full of vast monocultures controlled by a decreasing number of corporations. Unfortunately, it seems that the regenerative agriculture movement is in danger of going down that same path. Just look at the increase of multinational corporations claiming to promote regenerative agriculture, like Walmart, Purina, General Mills, Danone, and the consortium that includes Nestle, Unilever, Kellogg, and McCain Foods. Regenerative agriculture's practices were developed before that phrase was coined by Robert Rodale in the 1980s in the US. It's described by many as an approach to food and farming systems, which aims to recuperate biodiversity, soil, water, and nutrient cycles, economies, and communities. It's notably grown in public awareness over the past decade, and especially in these last few years in Australia, as our country has suffered unprecedented fires while enduring extended droughts. Much of the research around regenerative agriculture concentrates on the importance of soil or on various techniques, and others focus on regenerative agriculture as a way to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Charlie Massey's wonderful 2017 book, Call of the Reed Warbler, is an account of a dozen broadacre farmers in Australia who have overcome the mechanical mindset, he calls it, to farm with nature. And this is arguably one of the most radical of regenerative agriculture's foundational texts, as it actively tackles questions around farmers' very ways of thinking and being in the world. Despite these steps forward, regenerative agriculture remains looped into the premises of economic and socio-political systems that treat farms and farmers as separate economic units. The two impulses are incompatible. We cannot return to an agriculture that acknowledges a more natural economy. Sorry? Oh. We cannot return to an agriculture that acknowledges a more natural economy defined by a shared ecosystem that still operates under a social system that defines farmers almost entirely as segregated competitors in the market and sectioned off on the landscape. Such systems reward practices that externalize the damage of such agriculture off farm and onto our neighbors, both local and global. So while regenerative agriculture has gained momentum and prominence in Australia, agroecology is much less well known or understood here, though there is a deep and substantial literature and movement internationally. Broadly speaking, agroecology is a scientifically and experientially justified practice of agriculture that is sensitive to the ecosystems in which it is situated, and critically, that fosters the democratic participation of farmers in the food system. Its original and still predominant practitioners are Indigenous peoples and peasant smallholders the world over. Many of its advocates make a strong case for relying on peasant and Indigenous knowledge of their land and systems to produce sufficient food sustainably. A science, a set of practices, and a social movement, agroecology is concerned with the importance of biodiversity, the role of animals in agroecosystems, and the lived social, economic, and political realities of small-scale farmers. The term agroecology was coined by Russian agronomist Basil Benson in 1930, all the way back then, and the practice emerged as more of a social movement in Mexico in the 1970s in resistance to the Green Revolution. The democratic and ecological potential of agroecology and its political expression in food sovereignty has been well canvassed for decades. There's been an explosion of publications in the last decade that coincided with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, or the FAO, when they launched a process and series of global and regional symposia on agroecology in 2014. Political analysis in agroecology extends from Marxist ecological examinations of racism in food and agriculture systems to maintaining the integration of Indigenous peoples and peasants within a matrix of wild and managed ecosystems, to rejecting imperialist attempts to lock up nature to protect it from humans. The concept of nature's matrix, in which biodiversity, conservation, food production, and food sovereignty are all interconnected goals, represents a stark contrast to land-sparing arguments that posit humans as separate from and antithetical to the health of functional ecosystems. This debate is currently being played out in the UN's work on the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, with peasants, fisherfolk, and Indigenous peoples defending their rights to customary lands and territories as governments and conservation groups push for further enclosures. Next slide, please. Presently, there are economic, political, and cultural lock-ins that limit the ability of farmers to shift to agroecology. At the same time, there are enablers. At its core, geographical and environmental conditions have made and are making it hard for farmers to adopt agroecological practices. Strong beliefs amongst scientists, industry, and government elites in the power of science and technology to overcome climate constraints are leading to agroecology being ignored. Some of the implications of neoliberal agriculture policies for agroecology in Australia include weak farmer resources for adopting agroecological practices, demoralized and eroding rural communities, and investment in export support instead of environmental support. Next slide, please. However, enabling dynamics for an agroecological transition include crises, coalescing social organization, effective agroecological practices, external allies, and favorable policies. Next slide, please. All of the above enablers are actually right now coalescing under a global pandemic, strengthening global and national food sovereignty movements, the emergence of agroecology schools, such as those run by La Via Campesina, SRIMAS, and AFSA, and increasingly supportive state governments offering targeted support for small-scale farmers. That last point is very specific to my experience in Australia. We do have an increasingly supportive state government system here, but our federal government remains entirely export-focused. Food sovereignty embodies the collective politicization of agroecology. It asserts everyone's right to nutritious and culturally appropriate food, produced and distributed in ethical and ecologically sound ways, and our right to democratically determine our own food and agriculture systems. With its roots established in the mid-90s in the fertile soils of La Via Campesina, the Global Alliance of Peasants, food sovereignty was launched into public political discourse at the World Food Summit in Rome in 1996. Food sovereignty emerged as the antithesis of the corporate food regime and its unrealized claims for food security via the free trade rules of the World Trade Organization. Next slide, please. Agroecology fundamentally aims to promote the deep ecological, social, and economic knowledge of First Peoples, peasants, and other small-scale food producers and custodians of land. It puts decision-making power back in the hands of Indigenous peoples and peasants and local communities. Back to thinking about regenerative agriculture, the parallel sort of movement we see at the moment. Too much of what we see promoted as regenerative agriculture is still just capitalist agriculture with better inputs. Its ecological work is important, but ultimately iterative rather than transformational because of its lack of a political framework. In a critical way, regenerative agriculture is repeating the errors of the organics movement we discussed before. Organics were commodified and consolidated because the sector lacked a collective vision to unshackle itself from capitalist food systems. To my knowledge, regenerative agriculture has not developed a theory of change for an economic or social transformation, and is growing a new generation of experts and gurus who profit from teaching the how rather than the what or why. This is a critical juncture for regenerative agriculture. Can it shift to teaching the what as well as the how? Who will its teachers be? Will they accept the challenge to think and advocate beyond farm boundaries to the broader social and political economies and ecologies in which farmers care for country? Agroecology, on the other hand, has a well-developed theory of change. Next slide, please. It works to support horizontal knowledge sharing by empowering farmers and their communities to learn from and with each other and the land and all on it, rather than relying on external experts for inputs of knowledge or other resources. The Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance has recently formed the Agroecology Action Research Network, and we're doing this as a partnership between farmers and academics, where the academics can build research projects based on the farmers' needs, not the academics' needs. And we believe that agricultural action research can inform our understanding of the agroecological innovations that are happening on farms already and inspire new ideas of what is possible on farms and off. And so in 1 week's time, my husband and I actually are driving up the east coast of Australia to host agroecology workshops on a series of farms where farmers will share information in that horizontal learning model, and hopefully see a revolution of agroecology spreading up the coast of our country. By collectivizing and uniting the voices of the people in social movements and actualizing shared decision-making, agroecology offers genuine political strength and capacity for policy reform, as well as grassroots transformations. A major strength of agroecology is that it is immune to being captured as a brand due to its grassroots, democratic principles and practices. Nobody can own or certify agroecology because it asserts everybody's right to practice it without reliance on or creation of externalities. Next slide, please. So the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, along with many of our comrades around the world, such as Srimas, are collectivizing, we're organizing, and we're acting. And the way we specifically are doing that here is promoting the sovereignty of First Peoples first. We promote fair and sustainable land and resource use. We're growing community-supported agriculture and other solidarity economies. We encourage biodiversity in wild and managed ecosystems. We support the community control of the means of production through the building of cooperative abattoirs or grain mills or dairy processing facilities, getting them back out of corporate hands, reducing corporate control of food and agriculture systems in the process. And also we have to fight corrupt water management in a country like Australia. Thank you for having me here today to talk about agroecology and all of its, I think, potential for a democratic society in which we care for land and animals and everything in between, and build a future where pandemics will not be the norm, and we can bring climate change into check because we don't let corporations continue with the unstoppable sort of pollution that they seem to be doing at the moment. So thank you, and I welcome the discussion that I hope we'll now have based on some of what I hope was not only interesting, but slightly provocative.
Thank you, Tammy, for your wonderful speech, for a wonderful talk. Again, I don't see any question in the chat box. So probably you want to ask Tammy directly. So if you have any questions, you can unmute and ask Tammy directly. Any questions or any comment?
Tammy, I asked first. Sorry.
Yes, please. Tammy.
Maybe if you can share some example of this favorable policies that encourage agroecology, would be helpful for us to see maybe. Any example from your country or others? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Annie. So in 2017, here in my home state of Victoria, we started fighting the some land use regulations that treat small-scale pastured livestock farmers exactly the same as huge sheds of animals. So for us to be able to farm animals here, and I don't know what it's like in Malaysia, but here to be able to farm, we have to have permits in many cases. We have to apply to be able to farm. And in 2017, when we realized, well, it became a problem that farmers on very small land parcels with very small numbers of animals outdoors, not causing pollution, were being forced to pay the same amount and do the same amount of paperwork as the large sheds of animals. So we started lobbying the government in 2017 or 2016 really. And then in 2018, we won regulatory reform. So now the land use planning provisions in Victoria treat smallholder livestock production differently and like the low risk that it poses to environment and amenity. And now the sheds are treated like sheds, and we're not treated that way. So that's one example. And we're currently working with our minister for another change around abattoirs or slaughterhouses for livestock to allow, again, very small scale slaughter on small farms for commercial sale without having to have a permit. We would still have to have our food safety licenses, but not land use permits, because it's considered part of the rural industry of what we're doing. So these kind of regulations that have been designed for big industrial supply chains are being applied inappropriately to our small scale farms. And we're slowly but surely seeking to reform them to favor smallholders.
Thank you, Tammy.
Okay, thank you. I have a second question here. Tammy, if you look at my slide, if you can see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do the agroecology movement and farmers work together with the organic farmers?
Absolutely. We find that in our movement, some of our farmers still choose to be certified organic, but most increasingly are choosing not to be certified organic because those certification standards can be given to the big industrial organics as well. And the smallholders don't want to be put in the same boat, if you like. So So there's a bit of a movement away from certification and towards more transparency and having people have access to our farms rather than third-party auditors certifying them. But I would say also in our movement, most of our agroecological farmers are, if not certified organic, they are using organic methods. They're not spraying, they're not using synthetic fertilizers, they're using agroecological methods and have a lot of relationships with the notion of organic. I just realized I should turn a light on. It's getting darker here. Just 1 second.
Yeah, okay, no problem, Tammy. So we'll wait for Tammy just a while.
Sorry, I
No
should have
problem.
turned it on before.
Okay, next question. Sorry, I need to reshare again.
I can see them in the chat too.
Oh, you can see in the chat. Okay,
can.
great. Okay,
Yeah.
now, okay. No problem. Okay. Can you comment on youth participation in agriculture in Australia and how AFSA promotes it?
Yes, thank you. So, like in most parts of the world, farming is becoming an increasingly older activity. The average age of farmers in Australia, I think, is 55. And in industrial agriculture, that remains a problem, and they're still not attracting youth into farming. However, in our food sovereignty and agroecology movement here, we find the opposite. We are attracting more young people than we can find land for. So they come to us in droves looking for support. How can we be farmers? Because smallholder farming is so attractive. It's a life that people want to live. They don't want to live in the city. They feel that it doesn't have the meaning for them and they can't access the good food, and they'd like to move to land and grow it. So we have a very strong youth contingent to our movement. And we have another part of AFSA that we developed called FUPL, which is farming on other people's land. And it is finding ways, we're helping, we have a legal defense fund that we established many years ago too. So our legal advisor is helping people with share farming agreements and how to have perhaps older farmers who are not fully utilizing their land anymore. How can they have an arrangement with young farmers who would like to farm on that land? So we're doing what we can to support more young farmers. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So another question here. Can you share some examples on how we can implement agroecology?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many methods for how to implement agroecology. It depends on obviously your climate and your soils, the diet of the people around you. But I think the key principles that we talk about in agroecology, of course, are like diversity. So when we came, we first just had pigs on our paddocks, and although we were raising them well, we thought, well, this isn't very agroecological, is it, if we just raise one kind of animal on one kind of grass? And so we have continued to increase the diversity of the number of animals and the way they move through the landscape. And we have also changed some of the grasses and forage that grow in the soil so that we have different root systems in our garlic beds, as well as our own vegetable beds here, like for our household. We don't do any tilling of soil. It's always just layering more soil instead of digging, so that the microbial life remains and fungi life remains really healthy. Those are some. I would recommend having a look at, my copy is not in here, but the wonderful book by Peter Russett and Miguel Altieri, which is called Agroecology, Science, Practice and Politics. And Peter spoke only a few months ago here, but the PDF of that book is available online. You don't have to buy it as a hard copy.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Next question is, the use of pesticides and fertilizers damage the wetland and other bodies of water. How can this problem be addressed?
I mean, we have to ban agricultural chemicals, really. So I think I would love to see none of those things be allowed. And that's a matter for lobbying our governments for stricter controls. We're pretty fortunate in Australia. Our controls are a bit stricter than in some parts of the world. But we too still have far too great a use of pesticides and fertilizers in our croplands. And I think our soils are mostly just dead from this. We have very little water on this continent, so it doesn't pollute as many waterways, not like Malaysia. So yeah, I think we have to, in that case, be collectivized and be lobbying our governments for the reform to protect us from the overuse of agrochemicals.
Okay, we have one question from India, Tammy. Okay, so in India, specifically in a very poor district where I am working, we have succeeded in forming a farmers producer organization. It somehow brings forth the sovereignty of people, specifically, especially women, in play. How are we? How do we reduce the corporate control? You have a
I
comment
think,
on that?
yeah, but I think it's, you know, it's the two parts, right? It's the collectivizing, and the movements, the protests in India have been inspiring to the world to see what happens when people act together and say, we will not stand for this continuing erosion of our capacity to farm because of corporate control of the system. So that collective side is important, but sometimes we have governments so unfriendly that we could literally bring the whole population to parliament and not get the change that we wanted. And so our view is that while you lobby for change as collectives, as producers organizations, at the same time, you must be building the new system, or the old new system, that will make the existing industrial system obsolete. We have to give people the choices of the agroecological food to then turn away from the corporate food. That's how we win, I think, is we just keep building our movements.
Okay, this is from Gomati. Okay, how widespread is the understanding of agroecology? I'm not sure it's in Malaysia or in the world, and does AgriSmart take into account the agroecology practices?
I don't know what AgriSmart is. Is that,
Probably,
do you know?
Smart agriculture using the technology.
Like climate smart agriculture?
Probably precision agriculture, smart agriculture. I think that's kind of thing.
Or like if this agricultural industrial revolution 4.0, this kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So I would say that it does not take into consideration agroecological principles in that case. It might borrow some of its practices. That's not uncommon in these what I think of as weasel words, right? You know, so we have climate smart agriculture, there's sustainable intensification, there's precision agriculture. There are all these things that are simply not agroecology, but they might use some of our practices. Integrated pest management comes to mind. However, they don't have the political, the democratic kind of potential. They're not looking to put power back in the hands of the people. They're here to sell you solutions. So most of the time when there's a movement that's, or not a movement, but a description of a better kind of agriculture where somebody can come and sell you another part of the solution, it's probably not agroecology. So, and how widespread is the understanding of it? It really depends on where you are in the world. In Latin America, agroecology is very strong. Like I said in my talk, in Australia, not at all. We're trying to grow the knowledge of agroecology here, but it's very dependent on where you are.
Okay, thanks. One question here from Adams Aziz. In terms of crop yield, how does agroecological farming compare to conventional farming?
So what they find is a bit like with organics. Overall yield tends to be higher in agroecological systems, but it's higher of more things. It's if you try to grow a monoculture and call that agroecological, you will probably have a lower yield because you're building a system that is not diverse and resilient. And the point of agroecology is to diversify and increase resilience, which will therefore see an overall yield increase.
Yeah. Timmy, I just want to warn you, we have a lot of questions here. I just want to, the host, just keep on timing, I guess, because I cannot see when should we stop. I think this is kind of very interesting discussion right now. Okay, we have
so good.
We have plenty of time. It's okay.
Yeah. Great. I have tens of questions right now.
Yeah.
Okay. This is very interesting. So the question also, so this is from YouTube. Alternative to certification is very important. Please explain more on the transparency process.
So I think in terms of the alternatives to certification, it's really reliant on farms remaining small and localized and accessible. So you can't say that it's totally transparent if the farms are still very, very far from the people who eat the food. It's difficult to be as transparent in that case. So it's in a country like Australia, this is actually harder. Our country is so large, and most of the farms are also very large. And so even if they were doing really good practices, which many are, we have a thriving regenerative agriculture movement that is really caring for their land so much better and not using chemicals, but they're far away and they sell into commodity markets. And in those cases, I suppose there is still a place for certification, because really certification is to protect us from things we cannot see. Whereas agroecology says that we would actually be working in a system where the eaters know their farmers and the farmers know their eaters. And that's why you don't need a certification.
Okay. Okay, another from Fitri Amir. Can or should agroecology being upscaled to cater economic benefit to a community, or it should stay small and traditional?
So the question of scaling is a really interesting one in agroecology. In terms of sheer size of landholding, no, it should not be scaled, because once you scale it, it becomes again almost impossible to be as democratic, and also impossible to sell the produce from a very, very large farm directly to its community. So you need to keep it at a community size, if you like, so that you're be able to have genuine relationships within the community. In terms of scaling, we talk about scaling out though, and that's about gaining institutional support for agroecology so that we can have more farms, not bigger farms. So the economic benefit to communities, like we literally employ more people on farms like this because we don't mechanize. We value labor over capital. And so instead of buying, the biggest tractor you can, you employ 2 more people and feed more people in your community. So it's of enormous economic benefit, I would argue, to communities.
Okay, next question from Yu Fong. Can big farms such as oil palm estates farm in an agroecological manner? I think it's easier to practice agroecology if farm size is small. So please comment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think something like an oil palm estate is automatic. It's a monoculture. So by definition, it's not agroecological. And because, as I said in the last question, because agroecology is fundamentally about economic and political transformations also, it's not an economic transformation if you're still selling into capitalist commodity markets. So we can't really call that agroecological, can we?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Again, here one more from Yapshi. I think almost the same. But okay, I just read it. Do we need to choose only one between conventional farming and agroecological farming, or both? Can that work well at the same time?
I don't think conventional farming is working well. So it's sort of a moot point in a way, isn't it? But I think the probably also important thing there is I feel like we need to rescue the conventional farmers from their lot. Like, how would you like to be somebody who didn't set out to destroy ecosystems, but now the very nature of how you were taught to farm, that's what you're doing. So I think we need to save our conventional comrades and bring them over to the other side.
Yeah, I also share the same opinion with you. Okay, very insightful presentation. Definitely a time for change of system to allow this to become. I think I lost my mind just now, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So the question is there a way to control the farming systems of choice, since this will be a platform of its own? Planting system do determine the costing and quality of the produce.
That was a long question. Let me just finish rereading it.
Yeah.
Support lower cost and trades of bypass.
I think he just want to ask about the what kind of, do we have a choice in the farming system? I think because we are talking about the sales. I think one of the
Yeah, I think look at from production costs.
production cost. Yep.
Would that affect at the end of the day the produce? How much it will cost? What we produce from here.
Yeah, so actually in a conversation with Peter Rossett just recently, we talked about that if you are trying to do agroecology over the top of a kind of conventional system, so it's monoculture, but you're trying to be more sensitive to ecosystems, but you're buying in your better inputs, like I talked about, then it will not be more economical for you. But if you are farming in a genuinely agroecological way, where you are producing those inputs on the farm with nutrient cycling and not buying in more and not selling into commodity markets, selling directly to your community, then I think the economic benefits are much greater in agroecological farming than they are in industrial farming.
This is one great question, I think, from Laura. Can agroecology practices lead to introduction of alien species that may harm or affect the crops?
Look, in theory, sure, that can happen in any system. But I think what we've seen, the research is very clear that the more diverse, more biodiverse the system is, especially like genetic species and ecosystem level, not just at one level, the more diverse it is. If an alien species comes in, it is less likely to become a virulent problem. So if you get a pest in a system that's really healthy, the system eats up the pest basically. Whereas if you come into a monoculture that is already very vulnerable, and you introduce that pest just goes, boom, here I go. I can just take off. And I think intensive livestock sheds are the most obvious example of that. You take genetically identical animals, you put them in unhealthy conditions in sheds, and then you bring in one form of influenza. And that form of influenza says, oh, here's a host, I make it sick. Oh, now it died. Oh, but there's one right next to it, the same. I can just keep going. Oh, and another one, another one, another one. And then you've developed a whole new avian flu or porcine flu. So a pest in a system with lack of genetic diversity is really dangerous. A so-called pest in a system full of genetic diversity is probably going to just be eaten up by the system.
Another question from Siti Hajar. Most urban farms here in Malaysia are now practicing vertical farming, fertigation, hydroponics. What do you think about the safety of the produce as well as the disposal wastewater?
I think there are a lot of problems with the vertical farming and hydroponics. And it's not just about the safety of water. It's about the overuse of energy. It's about not growing things in soil. It's about not fostering healthy soils. We know that the nutrient density in food that is grown from healthy and microbially rich soils, it's healthier food. And so the vertical farming seems to me like another technocratic solution when actually we just need to do better farming in actual soil.
Yeah, we have two questions from Fitri Amira. Just read the first one first. Australia is a member registered seed. Farmers can be sued for saving, sharing, and selling seed owned by the company. Do you have any issues in Australia on this?
Yeah, we do. So, yeah, we think we are not fans of UPOV. And it means that almost all of the seed available in Australia to our small market gardeners is actually grown by American companies in biosecure places here in Australia. It's American owned, American sold. And those farmers are not allowed to then save that seed and sow it again the next season. They have to keep buying it. And so access to locally adapted seed here is really, really hard to find. And we have a few, very few, but a few little farmers around Australia who are starting to breed for seed for the small scale market gardening world, for them to grow things that are locally adapted. But it's difficult because of the rights and registrations around seed.
Now, it will encourage more innovation by plant breeders and bring in more new seed varieties. Harsh.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
That's not what happens.
Yeah. So Australia often mentioned as an example of advanced and successful agriculture industry. What is your comment?
Yeah, they're lying. It doesn't, it brings in, when they say more new seed varieties, what they mean is another patented, slightly different version of the last one that was increasing yield and decreasing digestibility all the way along. And so you're getting poorer quality food. And with their notion of diversity is not like ours, right? We want to see eggplants and zucchini and pumpkins and maize, and we want to see that kind of diversity. We want to see 24 varieties of maize that, from a particular area, and they're like, oh, but we have a better genetically improved one that we're going to sell you, and now all the farmers in this district are going to change to that new one. I think in Canada, like 98% of the canola grown there is genetically modified, and it's mostly of one or two varieties. So it's a lie that it's going to increase diversity. And they love showing us as an advanced and successful agriculture industry. And that fits their narrative as an export country. Australia wants to be sold as someplace that can sell you all the food you need. But we shouldn't be. We're exporting our depleted soils and our very limited water resources in all of these exports. It's not good for the people of Australia, that's for sure.
From Rosnani Abu Bakar, what is the average size of agroecology farms in Australia?
Look, our average size here would be between 5 and 40 hectares. So probably a fair bit bigger than most in Malaysia. But in comparison with our industrial counterparts, their average size is more like 1,000 hectares. So here, if you're farming 40 hectares, they say, the industrial farmers say that we're not real farmers, and we're like, I mean, it's how we make our life and livelihood. It feels pretty real, but they see it as not very real. But yes, our land holdings are bigger than they are across Asia, but they're not huge in our agroecology farms.
From Satyajit Kumar, do sustainable livelihood and agroecology closely related to each other?
Yes, if I understand that correctly, the idea of, that you can gain a sustainable livelihood economically as well. So I think, like we talked about before, yes, it's the peasants' way, as we know, is to sustain their resource base, which is their ecological resource base, but also feeding themselves, and as well as being able to buy what they do need to, that they can't produce on their own farm. And agroecology is very much embedded in that very ancient tradition of peasants being able to look after the ecosystem in which they exist and the economic system in which they exist.
Okay, sorry, I'm just reading, so the questions keep coming. So, okay, from Muhammad Rizwan, do active agroecology reduce the reserve forest size?
The reserve forest size,
we have
like protected. No, so in theory and in practice, agroecology should be able to interact with forests in really healthy ways. And what we find on our small scale farms in Australia is that most of us are replanting trees on properties that were previously deforested, because we want to run silvopastoral systems where the trees and the livestock and the other plants kind of interact in a healthy agroecosystem way. So no, unlike monocultures that need to take over from forests to plant their own things, that's not what agroecology should look like.
Can aquaculture be considered agroecology?
I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on aquaculture. I think that there are healthy aquaculture systems within agroecological systems, but if it's just about the aquaculture without any kind of concern for its surrounding ecosystem, I would say not so much. But if aquaculture could be considered something like the duck rice fish farms, then sure, absolutely, that's a really balanced ecosystem.
I think one of it is aquaponic, right? One of the things that they try to embed aquaculture and agroecology. One of it is aquaponic. I'm not sure there is a good reference or not. Okay.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
words used around hydroponics, aquaponics, aquaculture. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is from Mary Ann. May ask if biochar can affect environment. I don't know if this is you can answer this or not. Yeah.
Well, I mean, biochar, which is made from wood, and we make bone char here with the bones. The process of pyrolization holds the minerals in whether it's wood or bones. And so like bones are very high in phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and of course, carbon. And instead of releasing those into the atmosphere through just burning, it superheats them in a low oxygen environment and keeps them in the original source of wood or bone. In doing that, you then can put it into something that's like fermenting, like a biofertilizer, which we make ours from whey from cheese making and molasses and cow manure. And so it's fermenting because of the manure mostly. And then we put the bone char in there, which activates those minerals, by which I mean it liberates them, so that when we then put that into the soil, all of those good minerals with the microbes and fungi that will help them actually start to do their work in the soil to help the plants grow are really beneficial. But of course, I guess if you just went and dumped bone char or biochar somewhere, I suspect that wouldn't be a great idea. But through the soil, it's incredibly healthy and helps sequester carbon in our soils as well.
Yep.
Did we run out of questions finally?
Yeah, we ran out. You answer everything very good. Yeah, interestingly. So do you have any more questions?
Oh, there's a couple more.
Yeah, there's just just comment. Aquaculture seems to be the new way to grow things for lack of land space. Singapore has embarked on this. The waste from the fish pond are channeled to fertilize the crop grown vertically in view of lack of space. So I think, yeah, that's what Gomati was trying to comment. Yeah, what's your opinion about that?
Yeah, look, I think, you have particular constraints in a country like Singapore. And so I'm certainly not going to criticize doing the best with what one has in terms of land size. Again, I would just always come back and ask some questions about the democratic nature of the food system. Do the people get to have a say in if there are concerns about whether that pollutes their systems or whether it's actually feeding everyone fairly? These are the other questions I'd still be asking about it without being an expert in aquaculture in Singapore by any means. And sorry, I see the one about, is biochar commonly used? It more increasingly is. It's increasing in popularity because our soils are some of the most depleted in the world. And so getting carbon back into Australian soils is a high priority for our farmers. So as people are starting to learn the techniques of biochar, they're wanting to use it more. One of the problems there goes back to what I said in the beginning of the talk. There are people who now want to sell you biochar, but biochar is not actually that hard to make. So what we would like to see happening is farmers going around like us, teaching each other how to do these things to make them, self-sufficient and not have to buy the biochar from somebody else.
Can we produce more biomass from agroecology, from Muhammad Rizwan?
Yes, literally we can. Absolutely. Because agroecology doesn't strip soils of their biomass. The idea is to keep it all in situ and let it keep growing more diversity and health and keeping soils covered. And
another question from Noraini, they just keep coming. How successful CSA for agroecology there in Australia? Do you have a niche market for this?
CSA has grown a lot in the last decade in Australia. When we first started, we've only been on our farm 10 years. And when we launched our CSA 8 years ago, we were one of a handful of CSA farmers in Australia. And now there would be, I don't know, maybe 100 CSA farms at least. And I know by Malaysian population figures, that doesn't sound like very much, but we're not a very populated country. And so we take it as a great success that it's been growing as rapidly as it has been. And again, as we do the Agroecology Roadshow, we will be encouraging more people to go down the path of CSA. In our case, I'll just share, it has CSA is meant to share the risks as well as the rewards with your members. And for some people, this is a hard concept, that as a farmer, you're asking the people who eat your food to share the risk with you if something goes wrong. And yet what happened, like, for example, in our world, we lost a number of our cattle to a mistake made by one of our farmhands 2 years ago. And our members absolutely stood with us, said, we will keep paying our monthly or annual payments and until you can get back on your feet. Some said, we will pay 2 years in advance to help you buy more cattle. Some said, just don't give me any beef in the box until you have it again, but I'll keep paying the same amount. And we were just saved because of our community. In a traditional situation in Australia, that kind of disaster happens, the farmer goes bust and it's over. But in our situation, we were really well supported by our beautiful community.
Yeah, you need that, right, for this to be successful.
Yeah,
I think that's all. Do you have any more questions? Great. I think that's it. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Tammy, for a very wonderful webinar.
Oh, thank you all for such good questions. It's been great.
I must have learned. I don't know. I have some questions and I feel like, oh, okay, the audience gave the questions that I want to ask. So then that's great. Yeah,
Great.
thank you everyone. Thank you everybody who joined us for today's webinar. To Tammy again, thank you for sharing your insights and expertise. Thank you for your time, and I hope you guys have a very wonderful session today. Just want to share my first love with agroecology. When my first love with agroecology is when I read my kids' book, my daughter book, about one topic. Talked about Segranona. This is a grandma who feed the whole village with her vegetables. So from there, so the way that he make it, he wrote it in that book, saying that, oh, this is agroecology. So
Yeah.
I cannot find the book right now. Where's the book?
Oh, I'd like to read that book, Shakiran. That sounds great.
Whoever have that book, just give me. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So I'll return this back to the host. If if the host want to take any pictures or just to record the moment today, so I return back to Srimat's host. Thank you very much, Tammy. Wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for being a great moderator. It's been a
It's so
pleasure.
nice to have you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
I wanted
So
to
good.
visit your place. So
Yes, I know. When the pandemic's over.
last year, but soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy and participant. Actually, we have another 30 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So before I end and close the session, I would like to invite maybe some of participants who like to have the you can unmute and also ask, or even you can maybe share about what the moderator have shared about how he is fall in love with agroecology. Okay. Please, if we have any, because we have some additional time.
To the host, I'm very sorry. I don't know what until what time. So we have another 15 minutes, right?
It's okay.
But I think it is really interesting how in Australia, youth are coming back looking for farms. Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is, I think, something that maybe we could in Malaysia, because here we think that all this digital gadget is the thing that will lure the youth. Is this I don't know whether that is also the same. Is dependency on digitalization of farming. Will this attract them, or is it really the feeling being in the farm? This is, something that is nice. So Tammy can share a bit more. How do you do this? That you get the interest of this youth.
It's interesting, right? I think the interest from youth probably comes first from those who already have, I don't know, a bit more of an interest in land and nature in a way that is different to those who are naturally drawn to technological solutions to everything. We're just, really easily captured by the next shiny tool, the next shiny kind of bit of tech. And so capturing the ones who think, oh, but this really cool new bit of tech will save us from everything. How you capture their imagination, I think is, for one thing, I think we look like our life is better to live than the ones who, are so reliant on digital devices for their well-being. It's not unintentional that we show what we're living to try and attract more people to a life that is quite bountiful with very little technology. And I think that's one of the things we have to keep doing to attract the young people, is showing this is a really full and wonderful life, as compared with a life with, in an apartment doing everything remotely with a drone. Especially in COVID, who wants to live in an apartment right now, right? I shouldn't say that to you, should I, Annie? You're on mute.
It's okay. My balcony is green. I have my small little farm. Still using soil, not hydroponic, not aquaponic. Yeah, still using soil. I still believe that soil is, the medium to go. So I think, there's a lot of this, interest into, because I'm now also in this committee looking into all this closed system for food plant factory, they call it now. Yeah, a closed system to produce all our vegetable. Yeah, so they call it plant factory, and standards coming up, and of course the concern is looking at how, whether the water disposal, but they say this is closed system, all nutrient will be recycled, everything will be used in there. But it is, as you say, energy intensive farming. It is. Yeah. In Malaysia, until that we cannot solve our energy dependency on fossil fuel, this is nothing that we can, we have to be careful. Yeah,
absolutely.
Electricity bill is really, not an easy thing to cope with. Yeah, here.
Yeah, and it's another thing I would say in terms of collectivizing. One of the things we need to turn our collective efforts in food sovereignty and agroecology towards as well is the problems of extractive industries and mining, because we could sequester all the carbon that agriculture emits if we were running all agroecological systems. However, we would not solve the carbon problem because they're still mining like crazy for so many industries.
Yeah.
So doing what we are in agroecology is one thing, but we need to be conscious that the fossil fuel industry is a monster in its own right that we have to be dealing with as well.
Dr. Narela, want to say something?
Can I say something?
Anita. Okay, Dr. Anizan. Yes.
Okay. Can I say something? Yeah. I would like to say that while we are cognizant of the big picture of agroecology, I'm at the moment more into, and I would like to share more into macro management at the level of bringing knowledge and practice to the community level in Malaysia, specifically with women and the village heads that they come under. So one of the things that Srimas is involved in is a women's project together with Women Equality Association, that we encourage women from Sawah Sempadan to start planting plants under integrated natural farming that incorporates companion planting, or some people might call it complementary planting. So what we do is we introduce 3 plants, tomatoes, chilies, and long beans in a complementary fashion. However, we face a lot of snacks, hindrances because of the MCO and others. However, there are some elements of, how do you say, elements of opportunity where the women are now seeing that they are able to work together to do something good for something good in terms of agriculture and giving space to planting crops that are more healthier, and they are able to express how they feel about this pesticides and how foods are toxic for their children and all, which was not even possible before. So what I'm saying is this is addressing awareness on agroecology, but at a very basic level, and that's basically what I feel is we are in Malaysia, that most people cannot even are not even past that stage of just relating to planting something in a healthy way, so we face a lot of challenges because of the MCO, but we try to use social media, and we're trying to familiarize the women participants with using social media to interact with us. And it's still an uphill battle, but we are not faced by it. We are making some plans perhaps to go on to organize these women to plant chili together with long beans, and then get them to sell on the market. And this would involve women in Sawah Sepadan as well as Wakaf Aid Kelantan. So just to share that, again, to my point that I think there's a lot of micromanagement that needs to be done on the ground by NGOs such as ours, and not just to address the bigger picture scenario. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is how I think when we come to agroecology, we see the human and social values, putting in place that more participation of the community at the community level, enhancing social participation. I think this is a very crucial element, and the food culture in Malaysia as well, to look at how food is utilized. That is why when we talk about diversity and link it again to what we eat, how we eat, I think this is very critical in agroecology itself. Good to see women more empowered. I think this is one. And earlier, I think in the beginning of your talk, Temi, you mentioned about the indigenous people, how they have really moved forward, agroecology from the beginning, but somehow they are forgotten or neglected. I think it's really even here we look at our tradition closely when it comes to farming. I think we should look at this in that way as well.
Yeah, and I also agree that the work to be done to spread the agroecological transition, sometimes it is kind of the very basic practices on the ground with groups of people. Sometimes it's the big political work. But even when we're working across those scales, we should be empowering the people who we're helping learn the practices, that also this is a social movement and they are part of it, and help them collectivize locally, if not connecting necessarily to the national groups even, but just the power that happens when people come together to speak as a whole rather than speaking independently. And that work can be done from some of the farmers that we'll visit on our trip north, who are not part of any collectives either, and who are just learning some practices. But you can help them share the practices with other farmers and say, and now how are you two going to work together? Because you have a problem in local government. So why don't you form a little organization here? So constantly empowering, both with practices and politics, I think. And I see a question here.
And crop
Crop
rotation
rotation.
for rice.
Yeah, crop
Can I
rotation.
say something? Anthony here, can I say something?
Of course, Anthony. Go ahead, Anthony. Hi, Anthony.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm in Langkawi. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In regards to agroecology, one of the area is trying to keep all your water within your site and to get it treated naturally. I specialize in constructed wetland. I've been doing this for 30 years now. I got it approved by the Environment Quality Council and signed up with Director General that can be used, yeah, officially. So does many farms or many agroecology farmer in Australia use constructed wetland because you're just using microbes and different plants and the water becomes class 1 drinking standard. All sort of pollution can be treated this way. And in my hotel, we have up to 500 people and we can treat it within 3 to 4 days, growing the fastest growing plants like duckweed, water hyacinth, water cabbage, uh, you know,
Yeah.
ginger family, pandanus. So I believe this could be shared with many people so that you don't have to use energy. You're just using plant and microbes. So this is something which could be used. And another area that we, since September last year, I have to run my resort myself. So now we easily get 1 ton of papaya, and generally every year we get about 1.5 tons of mango by doing edible landscape. So this could be applied also to commercial business with a bit of land in the resort. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert on wetlands being in one of the drier parts of Australia. But even here we do have people working on wetlands restoration. They tend to be dry in summer, and wet in winter down where I live. But there are people doing a lot of work to change our current system of lots of agricultural dams, which are not very healthy places. You know, or we call them dams. I don't know if you call them ponds or, but places where we hold water for our stock usually. And they're not very healthy systems, and there's quite a movement to see more biodiversity around the shores of those, and to filter that water and make it cleaner and healthier for the livestock, and just to hold water longer for a longer period over the dry season. So I think there's an increasing interest, but I would not say water is our specialty because we know so little of it. It's not much water here.
Okay.
All right. They have I think the question in the chat box from the Rosnani. Crop rotation is an agroecology system. Do you remove this from rice farm?
I don't know enough about rice farms. I mean, crop rotation is generally advisable. Somebody else here probably knows much better than I do about rice farms. The best ones I know of are the duck rice fish farms, and I don't think they rotate. I think they grow rice in them every year, but they have duck and fish involved throughout the year. And yeah, I don't know. Does anyone else know?
All right. So, so before I end, maybe do we have any more comment, sharing or questions? You can unmute. If not, we can close the session because Tammy also have shared a lot with us, which is quite interesting.
Dr. Rosnani can share a bit.
Yeah.
She's doing biochar and also, Dr. Rosnani, you want to share something? Is she still on, Dr. Rosnani?
Yes, Dr. Rosnani, please.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm ecology farms that you are using. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. yeah, because it's raining heavily right now, so there's interruption. Yeah, I'm just as I was saying that I'm the vice president of the Biochar Malaysia Association, and so happy to hear that you're using a lot of biochar in agroecology system farms there. Here we are trying to promote to the community by also trying to teach them how to make their own biochar, because commercial biochar is very expensive,
That's right.
and so this we think is the way. Yeah, like I'm glad to hear that you say that is the way forward for the farmers to use the biochar to make it themselves, right?
Yeah.
But then how do you control maybe air pollution if they are not prioritized properly at the farms?
Yeah, I mean, these are never ending questions, right? We're fortunate, I guess, in a way that our farms are more, that they are a bit bigger and more spread out. So the risk of much in the way of air pollution from biochar production in this country would be very low, because we just don't have enough farmers, frankly. But I also think that when we're teaching these techniques, it's important that we teach them well and explain the risks of an inappropriate pyrolization process that would lead to off-gassing of things that are actually dangerous for the air pollution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosani.
Thank you, Dr. Rosnani. Okay, can we have a group photo before we end? Okay, so I think everybody, you can turn on your camera. I will take photo.
I love this. Even on Zoom, you managed to do a group photo. That's so good.
All right. So they have 3 screens. Yeah, I will take first one. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
So nice. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Moment. Okay, for the next screen, the second one, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Just a moment.
From our international participant, I think we have.
Oh yeah, for your information, the participant is from various countries. As I can remember, we do have from Turkey, Thailand, Japan, India, Indonesia. Maybe we also have from Australia, from US. When we see on the registration, we do have many participants. And for your information, we also live stream to our YouTube, Srimas Society YouTube. And also we live stream on the our Facebook, Srimas Facebook. So to all the participants or audience today, yeah, you can feel free to follow us in our Facebook and also subscribe in our YouTube. All right. So
Would you like to leave your email address, Tammy, in case people would like to ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Put on the chat. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, if the audience or the other participant, you have any more questions or you want to do a collaboration or maybe the discussion with Tammy, you can email to her. Tammy share the email address in the chat box. Okay, all right. I think I would like to close the session for today. So I would like to thank you to Tammy, our guest speaker. Okay, and also our moderator, Dr. Muhammad Shakirin. Thank you very much because you are volunteer to be our moderator today. And also we have our rapporteur, Dr. Nurul. Okay, Dr. Nurul, who will write the reports on the webinar. And ladies and gentlemen, please also fill the attendance in the, we already gave the link in our chat box. Please fill the attendance and we will send you the e-certificate. Okay, and then we will have for the next month, our next webinar will be on the 27th of August. If I'm not mistaken, we will have the speaker from Tanzania. Okay, so we will also send the information to our participants. Okay, so thank you very much, Temi, for your time today and for the audience. I'll see you again.
Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Oke. Share.
Terima kasih. Thank you so much. I'm from
Thank you,
Indonesia.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Nice to see you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Basya.
Okay.
Aris.
See you next event.
Thank you.